Real women.
Real talk.
Real messy.
This is Messy Midlife.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Messy Midlife. Hi, ladies.
Good morning.
Hello.
How's everybody doing today?
Peachy keen.
It's a Monday.
Actually, so we've had a couple conversations recently that have been a lot more doctory and a lot more professional. I'm hoping that we can just chat today and not be have our doctor hats on so much. I mean, they might come out anyway because, they just do. We can't help it. But so I'm just curious, let's go back to our roots. What's on your mind?
I had a good conversation with one of my best friends from medical school yesterday. And was it yesterday? No, it was Saturday. Anyway, now see, I'm turning into my mom. What day was it? It was 11:47 a.m. and we talked for
It
20
doesn't even matter. And somehow I can't move forward until I figure out this thing that has no relevance on the story at all.
That's my life.
Exactly. So Mel and I were talking, and we hadn't talked in, gosh, it'd been a few months at least. And so she was asking me how things were going just with, my health and autoimmune and physical stuff. And so, sometimes it's hard because we're our own doctors, right? I don't have a primary care doctor. When I go see a specialist and they ask the primary care doctor, I say self or none. And I recognize, and I have recognized that that's not giving myself the support that I tell my patients they need. But to be honest,
And I mean, I agree with that. And I think it is wonderful that you have your own primary and we're here for you. And you do have a lot of really wonderful resources that frankly, I mean, not to toot our own horn, but you've got a good team. You've got a good team. And I
yes,
understand why that's come to be. And it's probably a good
yeah,
idea.
which is why I don't, right? Because I've always felt like I have my people I can rely on. I mean, that's just part of being a doctor. But also it's different, right? There are times where I don't reach out to my friends because they're busy. They have their lives. Making an appointment, this is my time with you. I don't really do that with my friends,
Yeah.
right? Mel and I were talking, and I was filling her in and she was asking a lot of questions. I feel better today. I had a cervical epidural last Tuesday, so 6 days ago. And it's actually helped a lot with the hand pain and all of the neuropathy that I've been experiencing. And we were talking about the arthritis picture, and she was shocked that I'm on 2 biologics, plus sulfasalazine, plus an anti-inflammatory, plus a Tylenol arthritis. She was shocked that the things I'm taking, and I was telling her how I had a really bad flare last week for a few days. And she was like, how can you possibly have a flare on all those things? So, we talked about the stress component of it. And I was telling her how, one of the things that is really strange with me is my blood sugar, my hemoglobin C, and my blood sugar will be totally normal, even actually on the lower side, but my insulin will be crazy high. And it's been that way. It's not just one time, it's been that way on multiple tests. And I saw an endocrinologist, and maybe this is kind of part of it too. I saw an endocrinologist at UCSD, and I was really concerned about this. And she basically said, insulin doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go into the details of that whole conversation, but basically it just wasn't anything to consider or think about, where for me, there's a reason. I went so far as to have not through her, but through another doctor, I went so far as to have a CT scan of my abdomen and pelvis to see if there was an insulinoma, which there was not, didn't show that at all, which is good. But she was just giving me these ideas and saying, hey, when was the last time you did your labs? And have you ever run any autoimmune stuff for diabetes and blood sugar, right? And which are things I hadn't really thought about, right? I just thought okay, my body is messed up right now. I'm just kind of having to deal with it. And then we were talking about, with the insulin issue plus the joint stuff, have you tried a GLP-1? And I said, well, no, but I have a $350 bottle of Retatrutide sitting in my fridge that I've had for months, since December, that I actually packed up and, took to Palm Springs with me when I was going to take care of my dad. Just sat in the fridge there for 2 weeks, right? I literally went and pulled out my medical kit, got all my needles and syringes and took it with me, and then didn't touch it. I have $300 worth of BPC 157 sitting in the fridge that I've not touched.
Which is a peptide that people are saying is the miracle peptide for all things. We'll probably have a conversation
Mhm.
about that when we get our medical hats back on.
But a
Just
lot
because
of
what
people have like a lot of joint pain and pain relief with it.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the retatrutide, right? That's one of the things that people are really noticing with it. And I've had a couple patients tell me that have had significant joint and back pain that it's basically helped to go away. So we got into a conversation about how sometimes it's really difficult when you are feeling pulled in all of these different directions and taking care of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to just do the things that you know will be helpful for you. Because I was in the space of like, God, I'm such an idiot. Why, it's literally sitting there in my fridge waiting for me. I don't care. I can inject anything. I have no fear of needles. I've injected stuff in like for years and years, right? Why would I? What's keeping me from doing it? And I'm interested in your take, Karen, like from the like therapy perspective too. But it's like, what's stopping me from doing something that is sitting 10 feet away from where I am right now? Like, why haven't I done it? Right? And it's that whole, I don't know, the whole idea of our energy is being so pushed out and pulled out
Yeah.
to other situations and other people
Yeah.
that there's like nothing left for us.
I think it goes beyond just the energy going out to people. I think that there is, at least for me, and if I'm reading your mind and just how I know you and the conversations we've had, I think that there's also just a limit to how much we have the capacity for. Like you said, you're already taking so many things. I think that sometimes we reach a point where things that we have used having failed us, it feels like one more thing. And what if this fails us? So starting something that might be helpful sometimes feels even worse than not having an option, because what if this option fails? I
Yeah.
think there's also just adding one more thing to an already very full life that requires a certain amount of consistency, and not necessarily a daily thing. You have to remember to give yourself an injection at a certain point. And preparing an injection takes a small amount of effort, but sometimes one little more thing that you have to remember to do at a not daily interval feels like a lot. And then let's just be honest, just the daily work without including a medication, all of the things that we feel like we need to do, or that like legitimately we need to do, that our healthcare providers, friends, just our medical training, social media, whatever happens to be, that are required to take care of an aging body, it is a lot, a lot. And so even doing something that you need to do and that will prevent further issues in the long run, or that could help you very immediately right now, can become really hard for all of those things.
I think you both nailed it. The piece I would add there, and it's really just a re-delivery of the information that you've both mentioned, Eliza, you specifically targeting the fact that there is so much to do for others, the sandwich generation piece. And then Jen, what you're talking about, which encompasses the psychology of healing and the psychology of change. And so when we put these two things together, the energy necessary for making the decision and scheduling it is not readily available, because you're taking care of so many other things outside of yourself and of yourself, which Jen, you also mentioned, right? It's not like this is the one and only thing you have to do for your health. There's all of these other things. And so it reminds me of the stages of change. And even though in some moments you may have been at a action stage of change when you purchased it, there's been a lot of things that have happened, and the psychological piece around hopelessness that keeps bubbling up around, is anything ever going to make it better? And I think we've all experienced that in different ways, requires us to go from a pre-contemplative stage to a contemplative stage to a preparation stage to an action stage, and then maintenance after that, right? It's not this automatic thing. And that requires energy that is currently being given to our loved ones, our pets, other forms of self-care. That's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And we end up in this place where we then start to beat ourselves up about not taking this action that might help us. And where's the line of the stress that adding this thing in causes and the ways that we increase our inflammation, increase all of the hormone cascades that we've talked about recently that can make things go a little bit chaotic and in like increase the impact that stress has on our lives and on our health and everything. Where does that line exist? And where do we cross it? Where does the initial stressor and potentially ongoing stressor, where does that become more beneficial to us than not doing something, and where does the not doing something help?
Actually, something really came to mind when you said that for me. And I'm kind of surprised by myself, but I'm actually in this space right now, not beating myself up.
Mm.
And you guys know that's a first for me. So even though I know I have these things available to me, I hate air quotes, but I should have been doing it. I'm not in that place of being mad with myself or upset with myself. And that feels like a big shift, right? I think it's been coming, right? I've been so much gentler and so much kinder to myself over the last few years in terms of things like that, right? But when you said that, Jen, I was like, surprise, I'm not. For once. And I think that's what we need to give ourselves, but also give each other, right? And I think that's why being doctors like we are and the type of care we provide is so important for our patients because we don't focus on the you should have been doing
Oh
this,
gosh.
Mhm.
right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Where are you today?
yeah, let's start now. And what you should have been doing doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And I say that to patients all the time, right? But this is the first time in a while that I've actually like truly felt that
Mhm.
for myself.
That's celebration worthy for sure.
Yeah.
That's really, really lovely. And the validation that I think is so helpful to receive from your girlfriends, your loved ones and it's something that deep down there's a part of you that knows you are busy and the energy necessary to implement a new routine requires energy, and it's not just about the specifics and the logistics. There's a little bit of healing and reconciling that has to occur beyond that piece.
Something else that came up was, and it's a little bit of a different topic, but I feel like this is definitely something that's been on my mind too. So relationships with, for us, obviously we're friends and doctors. And when I was talking to Mel, she's a wonderful doctor as well. But we were talking also about that the dynamic between friends, between our female friends, and being able to be really honest with each other and not feel like it's going to hurt the other person or that we're saying something that they don't want to hear. And like I know Jen and I have had lots of conversations about this just as friends, but that idea of, when you see a friend or like, a sister like we are, right? When you see somebody so close to you doing something that isn't the right thing for them or you really feel isn't in their best interest, and how we really hold back from saying that because we don't want them to get defensive. We don't want to risk the chance that we could maybe ruin a friendship or there could be resentment or anything. And so we were talking a lot about there has to be like a collective shift in that where we're able to speak freely, because the reality is your friends, your closest friends, your sisters, your siblings, really honestly, a lot of times when you have that close relationship, do know what's best for you. And they can see things that you're not seeing, and how there has to be like this shift in the dynamic of feeling like you can't speak honestly because you're worried about their reaction. Like we have to get to a place where we can find a way to do that and
Mhm.
speak that, but when also on the flip side, find a way where we can accept that even if it's not what we want to hear.
Yes.
And this is 100%. So you said it's not connected, but it's 100% connected to what we're talking about because
As I was talking, I realized it was.
yeah, because it's not just about should you take this medication or should you go to this doctor appointment. It's about the ways that your body is not responding to things it should be responding to, and it's not doing the things that it should be able to do, in large part because of some men who showed up in your life.
Yeah.
Honestly, let's just say it right out there. And the truth of the matter is, I failed you as a friend because I did not speak up a couple of times with these two men that
Yeah.
showed up in your life because I was trying to be respectful of and recognize that I was not the one in the relationship. that I was not the one who was living it. And I didn't necessarily have all of the information that I might need. And I was trying to just respect you and what you wanted and what you to trust that you were making the right decision for yourself, even though there were times along the way, multiple times that I was like, what is she doing? This is not going in the direction it should be going. She is not behaving like herself in these situations. I've lost a little bit of who she is, and I just hope she finds her way back, because if this continues along this path, I don't know where our friendship will go, because the ways that we are just changed by who we are spending our primary relationship with, right? And all of the ways that I see very clearly looking back to 2019 and the trajectory the way things have gone that have a very clear pinpoints with how you are doing physically and certain things that show up in those relationships. So I will own right now that I have been one of those people who has been too cautious in some cases, because I'm afraid of hurting our friendship, even though our friendship is potentially going to be harmed by the things that I'm not speaking up about, which is like, now that I say that out loud, like WTF, you know?
But it's so common, right? It's so common. I was talking with another friend last night about that, about just not wanting to make the other person feel defensive, right? I think part of why it's hard to hear that feedback sometimes is because I think that a lot of times we inherently know that. Like,
Hmm.
we know that things aren't right, but for whatever reason and whatever situation, we're trying to pretend they are. We're trying to cover it up. We're hopeful, right?
We're in a different stage of change.
Yeah.
This is what happens, right? So one friend may be in a place of, I am in a stage, in an action stage of change for my friend, but my friend is in a pre-contemplative stage of change for this particular thing. And I love the idea of both parties being really receptive and open and being able to hold the reality that there's so much love in a friendship that all we want is the best thing for them, to support the merging or the coming together of those stages of change. That's the secret sauce.
Well, and the people that you hold so close to your heart know your heart. Know that, I was so funny. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, probably longer than that. Oh God, no, probably 15 years ago. I was coming home from Mexico. I was there with my family and I was flying home. And there was a woman on my flight and we were chit chatting, and she was a TV producer. And it was when there were when the dating shows like The Bachelor, those types of things were like kind of becoming big and first starting out. It was before we had all the ones there are now. And she was saying like her idea was that siblings, parents, and best friends, it was a show. This was like her show idea, would pick, they would have, the candidates, and they would pick the partner or their family member or friend, and the family member and friend would have to agree. It was like she was saying like that you would marry them, right? But like the whole idea like was based on the premise that like your friends and family really do know so much about you and know who would be a good partner for you. And that sometimes when we're in relationship, we don't see all of that, right? But they can see so clearly. And it was really interesting because that's one of the things I thought about too, is in my last relationship, my friends and family saw so clearly what I was unable or unwilling to see. And I just thought, I still think that's like a fantastic premise for a
Yeah.
show, because I really think it would be something that was long lasting when they got to know them, right?
So basically, an arranged marriage dating show. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
But not based on
A cast
religion
of
or
some
wealth or
right.
social, right? But just based on really who would be
Mhm.
a good match for your person.
Like
Yeah.
a heart-centered, heart-driven,
Yeah.
really aligned, ideally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
That was just
amazing and
funny.
beautiful.
I don't know why that popped into my head.
It makes sense for why it popped into your head, because it's about having these conversations that are a little bit hard. And one of the hardest conversations I think for people to have is about something that can feel like a judgment, and that you're having a chemical response that is very different, that's basically removing you from reality. So I'm thinking of, falling in love, and the fact that we are all basically on drugs of our own making when we're falling in love. So we
Yeah.
cannot see things clearly because we're all freaking high for the first 6 months or so that we're falling into romantic love. with somebody. And that's also why we are constantly seeking something that is not going to be reproducible with the same person again in most circumstances because of without a substantial amount of effort, because it's just the chemistry that brings you to falling in love with somebody is just very different than staying in love with somebody. So I think there's that. There's also when something is happening related to substance use, that your perception of reality is very different than the people who are around you. And also if there's mental health stuff where your perception of reality is very different than what's happening around you or what people are seeing around you. Those are the three that really jump to mind. There's probably others as well, including things like with body dysmorphia, which is like physical and mental and that kind of thing. But most physical things, for the most part, people we have a similar reality, even if we don't have the same sensations. We understand what's to a degree about like the agreed upon space. And so it's when we have these like differing like realities, honestly, that it can be the hardest to have conversations, because it depends on how committed somebody is to their current perception of reality that's different from everybody else versus how committed they are to the friendship and to knowing the strength of that. And this came up for me a long time ago, where my first long-term boyfriend was a disaster, like across the board disaster in so many ways, red flags everywhere that I can see so clearly with time and distance. But my friends at the time only brought this up to my attention when we had like broken up for however many times and it was finally sticking. And one friend in particular, I will never forget, that I'm still friends with, said, you need to bring people around earlier, because you don't bring them around until you've already made your mind up about how you feel. And it's not safe to share what what we see. That's a problem. And so I started making a change. I took that very seriously, and I did start bringing people around a lot earlier. And I was like, okay, if I'm into like the third date and I think that there might be something here, friends need to be involved. Like they need to be meeting friends. And it's not about like, hey, you're going to be around forever. It's, hey, I'm thinking this might turn into a thing. And I want people to have the opportunity to say right up front, like, hey, you are not seeing this. And what do you think about this? And I have this whole like dating thing that I figured out that people used to tell me I needed to write a book about this, how I mastered or figured out online dating. And one of the things that I did was I made sure I dated multiple people at a time before I got really serious or anything with a single person, because I needed to have perspective on the things that people were doing that might be red flags or deal breakers that I might be ignoring and not saying to somebody else, and then blaming myself for and saying like, oh, this is me. This is a problem with me, or, oh, I'm expecting too much, or, oh, I'm whatever. I'm the problem. When it's like, but this other person over here is not being a dick about this. So it's clearly not me. This is not an unreasonable expectation for you to be a civil human about this scenario. So it helped to keep things a little bit more clear in my brain, because we can't see things clearly. And then we have all of the long-term impacts when we are not able to trust those friendships and those relationships, right? It's like so many of us have this ability to have the conversation only when things get to crisis.
Exactly.
And at that point, you're like, well, I'm going to lose this friendship if I don't say anything. So I'm going to take a chance of saying something in the hopes that I can keep this friendship and that they will understand and forgive. I've got a couple of friends, and Eliza, you're one of them, where I finally got the point that I was like, I'm going to just start saying the stuff. You're welcome in these situations, and he is not. So you just need to be aware of that. You
It's
know?
like a red flag panel, right? Like the partner must go before the panel, right? And then they can figure things out. I mean, it's hard, but I think it's like, I don't know, it's more so for me, the focus on being open to accepting that, right? Because we can do all the things and we can bring people around and our friends can tell us things, but for us individually, like being open to accepting that maybe this isn't what I thought it was. Right. And I feel like again, ties back into everything, like being open with our bodies to say, like, maybe I think that this is what's happening, but being open to maybe that's not what it is. Right. I think in a lot of ways with health stuff too. And I have patients like this all the time. Like, I'm coming in because of 1 and 2. And it's like, but that's actually not what's happening. It's, 57, 58, and 59 you don't even think about. And so I feel like it's just there's a bigger picture with it, right? It's each of our individual ability and willingness and openness to accepting that there are things that we don't see, and hearing that and being willing to pivot
Yeah.
and to change paths or trajectories or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's just as important as the people saying, "Hey, I need you to see this," or I need to tell you that I'm seeing this." We have to be able to say, "Okay, like, I'm open to seeing that too."
Yeah. I think that's what's really special about I have been on both ends of the spectrum. I know what you're saying, Eliza, is this is much bigger than just the partnership and relationship dynamic. And I hear that to keep with that same example. I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the side of being the one in the toxic relationship in my very early years, 19, early 20s, and then 30s and 40s being on the friend side of that. And what's really lovely is that I am finding more relationships are evolving and maturing in a way that we're having this conversation. This is a container that is safe. And your first question was, why is that GLP-1 in my fridge still? And maybe there's a part of you that's curious about having a really like heart to heart conversation around that and or something else, but it's lovely that I think what we're doing right in this moment is looking at how valuable our friendships are. And the value goes beyond the fact that we all bring such really interesting backgrounds and information. It comes back to the fact that we really care about each other and we want to step into this container for our own growth, trusting that each of us really loves the other person and would never say something to be spiteful or hurtful, really to say, hey, this is my perspective. Maybe this is something you haven't thought of, and being open and willing to play with that idea that might be really out of the line of trajectory that we were originally thinking.
Yeah.
What I just wrote down was like shame, because I think a lot of it comes back to that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's about, I should have been doing these things for my body that I haven't, or I've gained weight, or I'm in a partnership with somebody who does things I don't like. They're like, I think that the big part of that, and I think a big part of why we have difficulty saying that to people, but also difficulty hearing it, is because I do think it brings up shame. I think there is shame around that.
Yes.
I very specifically remember Jen one time, like walking with you in Balboa Park. And as I'm saying, oh, I'm going to do this, knowing that you were in your mind going, that's a really effing terrible idea, Lisa. But you didn't say it out loud, right? Because you were trying to be supportive. I knew that. But we get into a place where we're like, hey, well, I'm doing these things that maybe aren't the best for me. And then it's easy to close off because you recognize that, but then you're still doing it. You're making a decision that isn't in your best interest. And I think that that's where, we have to let go of the idea of that it's shameful, right?
Shame shame is one of the primary emotions that keeps us, all humans, stuck in that pre-contemplation, contemplation stage,
Yeah.
because that's where the shadows are. That's where the darkness is, and shame is a concealing emotion.
Mhm.
Can't look We don't wanna look at it.
I'd say I remember thinking that, like, how did this become my life? I've said that to myself, like, how did this become my life? And it does feel shameful around that, right? But it's like, why? Because I made a bad decision, because I love somebody that maybe I shouldn't have loved. Like, it's not, I didn't go into it, and none of us do, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do this thing that I know is bad for me.
Exactly. And that's right now. I like you. There's even some shame coming up right now with the
Yeah.
words you're choosing that you love somebody you shouldn't have, or you've did something you shouldn't have. You always made the best choice you could with the information you had at the time. And there is some ownership that people who had different information for not speaking up out of love for you own. And so every single one of us, like nobody ever, unless you're a sociopath, and even then, they're still making the best choice that they are capable of making with how they are wired and the information they have at the time. So there are very few people in the world who will actively say, I know I should be doing this thing and I'm still going to do this other thing anyway, even if they know, even if you're in the place, I know I should quit drinking. I know I should be stretching every night. I know I should be whatever that thing might be, writing a gratitude journal. And if you aren't, there is a reason why you aren't, that means that there is some sort of need that's not being met. There's some sort of barrier, some sort of thing. And so we just need to give ourselves forgiveness, even in how we're talking about things now in retrospect. Would you do something differently today with the information you have today? Yeah. Or can you say you shouldn't have loved him? No. You did love him, and that's just the truth. And did you make some decisions that put him above you? And the other one too, that like, did you make some decisions that put him and other people above yourself? Yes. And it still was the best decision you could have made at the time with the totality of the circumstances and who and where you were at that time. So let's just shift that a little bit.
You're right.
And the GLP-1, I think we can apply the same thought process about putting other people before yourself and before the things that could be potentially beneficial for you and us. I mean, this is sounding like we're piling on Aliza, and obviously as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about, how this applies to me as well. This is a human experience.
I also want to just, before we wrap this conversation, I want to point out about the fact that there are some things that are just not going to be safe to really talk about, or that we need to be willing to have a response that tells people, I appreciate your concern and I love you, and I'm not in the place that I can talk about this right now. And this comes up specifically, not to point it again to you, Aliza, but I know you had this happen to you with a good friend. Wait conversations, right? I remember you had somebody who loved you very much and loves you very much. I don't remember exactly which person it was that came to you and said, I just have to say this to you. You need to lose a lot of weight. At one point, somebody said that to you.
Yeah.
And it's just sometimes those things that you think you're saying from a place of love and like saying something that somebody needs to hear, you're actually saying something that can be really hurtful too, that is not helpful, that further drives the shame spiral, and that might be missing a whole lot of information. And just is misinformed. We'll have a conversation at some point about health at every size. It's one of our requested topics and something that is, I know, really important to all of us and is one of your passions, Aliza. So I know we'll have a conversation all about that. But there's a lot of things that people are doing to drive weight loss that are really, really counterproductive for overall health and well-being in so many ways, that drives greater mortality even. Frequent dieters are dying earlier because of the causes of frequent dieting. And so there's some things that are just not going to be safe to talk about. And so just because we're saying we need to have these hard conversations, it doesn't mean that you just say whatever the hell you're thinking. It also means that we need to be able to respond and say, hey, I appreciate your concern, and that's not okay to say, and I don't really welcome this. And perhaps even say in the future, I don't want you to not talk to me about these things that you might have concerns about. So I don't want to shut this down completely. I just need you to know that this conversation and this approach is not working and it's not helpful. What are your
And
thoughts
it
on
needs to be a two-way street, right? If somebody a relationship is safe when somebody comes with a piece of information and they're willing to receive feedback about that, right? If they're just like, I know what the truth is and I think that this is what's best for you, then that's not a safe relationship. And why am I going to waste my time and make myself vulnerable if they're not willing to have a dialogue that is based on growth and love?
Maybe that's what the line is what if you're coming with an absolute, you're probably not coming with a safe conversation.
Yes.
If you're coming with curiosity and like,
Yes.
could this be part of it? Then that's probably more of a safe conversation than like, you need to do this. And that's the answer, period.
Aliza, what just happened?
I was thinking, and if you're starting a conversation with, I don't want to hurt your feelings or I don't want to hurt you, but then don't. Say it. I think that's the biggest thing is if you know that what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, if you have to preface something with that, shut your mouth and think about
Try
it
again.
Think about a different way to try to express that care and concern for somebody, right?
Yes.
So that was how that started, Jen. That was exactly what was said, but it was prefaced with, I know I don't want to hurt you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Anytime you say but, you're negating the
Right.
thing you just said.
Yeah.
So it's, if you have to say but, then just stop.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. And I think that even in the
Like,
hardest
you're
situation,
about to be an asshole. When you say you're about to be an asshole, so just stop yourself.
yeah. I think even in the hardest conversations that can come up with some of the stuff in, especially in midlife, that we can always come from a place of curiosity and love, and know that even if we're going to say something that is a hard thing, that we might be wrong. And I'm thinking specifically of one of the most difficult conversations I've had to have, and some of the things that I had to work through, and a decision I made with a friend who was absolutely in crisis. I'm not going to give any specific details because she sometimes listens to this podcast and I do respect her privacy. And what she went through is something that many people go through in midlife, that is not something that people talk about enough. And that is having had a mental health crisis that was beyond anxiety and depression. And that I had to recognize that I wasn't understanding what was happening in her brain, and that I needed to meet her with, I don't know what is happening. I literally said to her, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I know you're not safe. Either what is happening in right now that you're experiencing, if it is real, then you are in danger. And if it is not real, you are in danger. It is just a different thing that is dangerous. And that's one thing I can say with certainty. You are in danger one way or the other. And I'm curious about which thing it is that is putting you in danger. And I want to get you help. And I had to make some decisions that I had to recognize that I could lose the friendship over, but that I was going to lose the friendship if I didn't do them anyway because of what was happening to her. And if we can have those kind of conversations at an earlier stage, I wonder how much we can support each other greater. I mean, even a conversation that might be, yeah, weight does contribute to some of the ailments that we experience when we are in midlife. We can't say that it doesn't contribute at all. Like some of the people in the health at every size movement, there's some people who went too far, I think, with just not acknowledging and accepting that there are some things that are weight related, and not everything that you think is weight related is. And so we can still even have curiosity about that. How much do you think this might be part of it? I think there are ways to be curious, passionate, loving conversations that can allow us space to talk about hard things that aren't coming from an absolute or a directive, or that puts us on the defensive, because then we're having to confront our shame and defend our choices that we clearly made when we were doing the best that we could. And even if we're starting to doubt those questions, we still have to protect our past selves and the decisions that we did make that got us there to a degree.
And maybe an approach to that is also like, you said being curious with that other person, but also with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like for me, like, okay, maybe that's what I'm going to be thinking about. Like when I'm walking laps in the pool is like being curious with myself about. That's a lot of what I've been doing lately, right? Is like thinking and honestly, having some aha moments, why I have done certain things and why I have brought certain things into my life. That was like a big moment for me when I was talking with one of my teachers um, last week or the week before was, oh, I I need to feel important. I don't want to be discarded. And that's a big piece of why I take care of everything. I do everything perfectly. I do the house and the schedule and the finances and the trips and everything, right? I plan it because I'm doing everything so perfectly. How could you possibly not need me? It's like a way that we make ourselves feel worthy in a way, or I shouldn't say we, it's a way that I made myself
You could say we.
like feel worthy,
At least two of us.
So
Yeah. And curiosity it's the light that helps to dissolve the shame. And when the shame starts to dismantle, it doesn't have that vice grip on us anymore. And we just start to flow through the stages of change. It's just about, where am I right now? There doesn't need to be a judgment. There doesn't need to be a harshness about it. It's just the reality of where I am. And if I can bring curiosity and that growth mindset to that, shame has no place. It's not being fed by the darkness. Oh, that's beautiful.
I think that another thing that it really brings when you are curious, it is almost like a message to the universe or God or whatever it is that your spiritual connection is, that you are available and willing to get new information and that you're willing to see something that maybe hadn't been considered before, whether it's being presented by a friend or if it's there and it's present and just waiting for the opportunity in your own mind to jump to the forefront. I think curiosity just allows new things to become available to us in all sorts of places. Karen, I want to ask you really quickly, just because you've said stages of change so many times. Can you just rattle off what the stages of change are for people?
Yeah. Yeah. So pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and then maintenance. And then it's a cycle oftentimes that we go through for many, many things before it becomes something that's more sustainable, that we can create a sustainable process, or maybe it's a one-time thing. But the moving from stage of change to stage of change it's a very individual process. And I think bringing curiosity to that is really helpful. As a matter of fact, that's actually the intervention that's most commonly used in helping people to move through those stages of change is called motivational interviewing. And curiosity is a big part of that. So when we can do that with ourselves and have that openness, solutions just start like what you were saying, Jen, like they just appear.
Yeah. And curiosity, I think, is one of the foundations for connection too. Connection with ourselves, connection with the world around us, connection with each other is being curious about others' experiences, others' opinions, others' whatever that can then change our own personal experience and also help us just know somebody in a deeper way than if we're coming with an answer. When we come with an answer, there's no growth. There's no growth opportunities. There's no chance to connect. You're establishing, I know more than you. This is what our relationship is. It is not a give and take. We don't have things to contribute to each other. I have something to give and you need to receive. And it is trying to establish a power dynamic that is just not great.
That's one of the things I love, Jen, about when you respond to messages that I send in our group chat that are like, I've got this big bomb of thing that is happening for me. And you're like, tell me more about, whatever it is to help you understand. Because when someone's not in the middle of the issue, it's not as clear to them what the big deal is, right? But I can feel that you're wanting to meet me there and you're wanting to help support me through whatever that is. So I just wanted to honor, and Eliza, of course, same, right? Like I just wanted to honor how I see that in our friendship, and it is so valuable.
I thank you for recognizing that and pointing out, because that's also going to reinforce that I continue to do that. I know part of it is that I recognize when I'm like when you're having something, I am creating a story in my head about what it is. And I'm like, this might be not the real thing that's happening. This is my story. I don't know if this is her story. And before I respond with a solution that you might be looking for, I need to understand what the actual story is. So, all right. I felt like I had 10,000 more things to say, as I usually do. And I'm going to suggest that we wrap our conversation for today and pick up maybe with some other topics that are just swirling from this in our next time we talk.
Can I show you guys something funny before we go? Well,
Of
it's not
course.
kind of funny, but we all said, okay, when something comes to mind, like write it down so we don't forget. This is my ADHD list from today. Just so everyone.
That's funny that's right.
Well,
It's ADHD
yeah.
list. I'll have to show you mine sometime. I don't have one
Oh,
today.
mine's just all over. I have one here that I've got a couple of notes, because the reason this is being said is because I had actually a really important point that never came back to me that we've probably edited out because I got so lost and sidetracked that I have no idea what I was saying. So we also have something written down, but my ADHD is that. Plus I'm, always knitting when we talk so that I not get distracted by writing down a whole bunch of things or random things popping up. So, all right. Well, I'm glad that even the non-ADHD, or at least non-official ADHD in
Right.
our group still has that. So hopefully somebody feels seen who got the video, because those who are doing the audio only, Eliza was sharing this lots of colors and stars and hearts,
And
all
beautifully organized.
yes,
Still.
because even, her ADHD is still very organized and not very,
Curious.
Really pretty.
because, everything with Eliza is that way. She wakes up and looks like she's ready to walk the runway, and she doodles notes and it's still gorgeous, and she could hang it on a wall someplace. So anyway, we're still going to wrap for today. Love you, ladies. Thanks so
Love
much
you.
for our conversation today.
Bye.
See you next time.
If our messy is your kind of messy, we'd love for you to rate, review, and follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd also love to know what's on your mind. If you were to join us, what would we be talking about? Email us at messymidlifepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram or TikTok.